to today's episode of Live Without Limits, Unlock Your Power, Blueprint to Transform Your Thinking, to Transform Your Life. I'm your host, Davida Shinsky, and I'm so glad that you're here today because we're diving into a topic that is essential to achieving success in any area of life: self-discipline. The title of today's show is Mastering Self-Discipline, the Key to Reaching Your Goals. So what is self-discipline and why is it so important? At its core, self-discipline is the ability to control your emotions, thoughts, and behaviors to achieve a long-term goal. It's about doing what needs to be done, even when you don't feel like it. And here's the kicker: it's often self-discipline, not motivation, that determines whether you reach your goals. So throughout this episode, we'll break down how self-discipline works, its importance, and how you can strengthen it to unlock your full potential. So whether you're striving for personal, professional, or even fitness goals, this episode is for you. So let's start by defining self-discipline. It's in practical terms, self-discipline is like having an internal system of control that helps you resist the urge to give in to distractions or temptations. It's the ability to prioritize long-term benefits over short-term gratification. Now, what do we mean by that? Well, let's look at it this way. You can gratify yourself now in the short term, but long term, what does that mean? Well, let's get into that. So self-discipline often gets confused with motivation, but there's a big difference. Motivation is about feeling excited to do something, but it comes and goes. Self-discipline, on the other hand, is what keeps you going even when the motivation is gone. It's the backbone that keeps you consistent. Well, let's look at this in terms of health and wellness. Many times at the beginning of the year, what happens? People will tell themselves, oh, we're going to lose weight. Oh, we're going to start exercising. And what happens? They do those things for about a month or two, and that's the motivation. But the self-discipline is to keep going even after the motivation is gone. A common myth about self-discipline is that it requires a superhuman level of willpower. But in reality, self-discipline is more about creating habits, systems that make it easier to stay on track. It's not about being perfect, but about making steady progress over time. Now, it takes 21 days to create a habit. That is that you do it consistently for 21 days. Now, I've been exercising for 40 years, and I believe I'm self-disciplined enough to tell myself to consistently go without being motivated. But yes, I'm up there at an age where it's a little bit harder to keep up that self-discipline. But because I have a disability, I use the paratransit system. So I know they're coming 3 days to take me to the gym, and I have to be ready. So that also motivates me, which includes the self-discipline. But also, here's the kicker, that because I've exercised for so long, and even on days when I don't exercise, I make a point of walking consistently and walking so many steps a day that I have kept up that discipline to do it And when I lived in Atlanta and I would go to the gym, I would walk home. And therefore, I was doing both. And I was very healthy and much lighter in weight. But where I live now, it's not so easy to get out and walk because when you live in Florida, the 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 heat can really wear you out and you really can't walk long distances like I could when I was living in Atlanta. So it's a discipline. It's a slightly different, but it's still something that you do consistently. Another misconception is that self-discipline leads to a boring, rigid life. Actually, it's the opposite. When you have self-discipline, you have the freedom to focus on what truly matters instead of getting sidetracked by distractions or bad habits. What is the importance of self-discipline? Now that we understand what self-discipline is, let's talk about why it's so important. First and foremost, self-discipline helps you stay focused, right? And upon doing so, let's back up again and let's look at what we need to look at. So, how can you Okay, so let's get back up here and start again. Now that we understand what self-discipline is, let's talk about why it's so important. First and foremost, self-discipline helps you stay focused and consistent. We live in a world full of distractions, and without self-discipline, it's easy to lose sight of your goals. Now, when we're talking about that, we're talking about time management because what happens is you block out a certain amount of time that you will be doing a specific project. The idea being that, and then you take breaks in between because it's easy to get distracted. But the distraction is you keep to that time of walking away, say for 5 minutes, and then coming back to doing what you were doing. So self-discipline also helps you manage procrastination. Think about it this way. How many times have you delayed working on something important because it felt uncomfortable or overwhelming? Self-discipline steps in to remind you that discomfort is temporary, but the rewards of pushing through are long lasting. It's also crucial to manage temptation, whether it's the temptation to scroll through social media when you should be working or to skip a workout. Self discipline gives you the power to say no to short term distractions in favor of long-term success. And how many times have we looked at self-discipline and understanding just how important it is? And not just an exercise, but when you're working, and especially now that more and more people are working from home, because it's easy to be distracted. Therefore, that's why it is so important when you work from home to have a room that you designated as your workplace and you close the door and you tell your family that when that door is closed, they are not allowed to come in because that's part of your self-discipline. How are you going to be constantly getting the things done that need to be done? Look at some of the most successful people, athletes, for instance, entrepreneurs, artists. They all have one thing in common: a high level of self-discipline. For example, Someone like Kobe Bryant, who would wake up at 4 a.m. every day to train, even on the days he didn't feel like it. That's self-discipline at work. And it's that same principle that can help you reach your own goals. Have you what this is what you should also do. Think of someone that you know who also has self-discipline and can get up. Now, have they not told you that for people who write or do certain things, that if you have a family and you want quiet time, always get up an hour before them and use that quiet time to get things done for yourself and understand exactly where you should be and how you need to do it. So, how do you develop self discipline? Well, it might seem daunting, but it's totally doable with the right strategies. Start small. Don't try to overhaul your entire life in one go. Focus on one habit that you'd like to improve, whether it's waking up earlier, exercising regularly, or managing your time better. Starting small makes it easier to stick to. Create a routine. Habits thrive on consistency. And the more you do something, the less effort it takes. For example, if your goal is to write every day, set a time and a place for it to make it a non-negotiable part of your day. Another key tip is to eliminate distractions. If you know certain things that make it harder for you to stay disciplined, like your phone or your TV, create an environment where these distractions are minimized. It's all about setting yourself up for success. That's the key. And the idea is this is why when they say set goals, that when you're at the beginning of the goal and you look towards the end, it's so far in the future that it seems so daunting. And that's why they say break it down into smaller chunks of activities so that you feel success along the way. And I remember a story that I was told or that I was heard about how a farmer took his grandchild out with him to go plant. And they were starting at the beginning, and the grandchild said, "It's too much. I don't think I can do it." And what the grandfather said to him was, "Turn your back to the end, start working from here, and then you can see how far you've gone as you progress. That way, by the time you get to the end and you look back, you can see just how much you've done without having to be afraid." Remember, self-discipline is like a muscle. The more you use it, the stronger it gets. So start with small actions and build it up from there. Each small win reinforces your ability to stay disciplined in the future. How does self-discipline lead to goal achievement? Well, this is a real interesting segment that we're going to get into now, because this is kind of what I alluded to in the previous section, was the turning of the back and being able to realize just how far you've gone along the way. So now let's connect the dots between self-discipline and achieving your goal. When you practice self-discipline, you make steady progress, even when the goal is and the going gets tough. Instead of waiting for the perfect moment or feeling, you take action And taking action is what brings you closer to your goals, whether it's improving your health, advancing your career, or building meaningful relationships. Remember a personal story that truly showed me the power of self discipline. So, what I'm going to do is tell you a story that for me, I grew up in a home that was very, very, very negative and was constantly being told how I couldn't do anything, how I wouldn't be able to live on my own, how I wouldn't be able to hold a job, how I wouldn't, because in my mother's mind, just the fact that I had a disability, that was her reason to hold me back and keep me from reaching a goal that I wanted for myself. And that was independence. But I knew what it would take for me to get where I wanted to be. And even starting my own business when I had virtually no money, and I initially, because I had a background in psychology and mental health, I wanted to do group therapy, but I didn't have the master's and I didn't have the PhD in those industries. But by getting into public speaking and going around as a professional speaker and working with corporations, that's where I excel. And I understood that because I remember that when we had to, in school, do book reports and go and stand up in front of the class and tell people the story about the book or what it meant. That's where I seem to excel because my behavior pattern, and this is very important, is to understand what your behavior pattern is. Because we have some of our strengths, some of our weaknesses. My strength is that I want to help people. And if I can do it by going out and doing a lot of professional speaking, and and now, because I'm getting towards the end of my career, my focus has changed because I was not as successful doing it offline because I didn't have the mobility to get around, to go do the things that I really wanted to do. And so once the internet became available, that's when I actually started doing my podcast back in 2006, 2007, because I knew that I didn't have the media kit to send out to the companies and the corporations, but I could always tell them, well, here's my podcast. Go listen to my show and see if that incorporates what you want for your speaker. And my background was also as an independent consultant, because I had training in mental health, was to associate with companies that had the assessment profiles that I could use in train the trainer sessions. And that's why I'm understanding that what's the behavior patterns, and I often use the DISC. Now, there's the pure ones, which is the 4, and they interchange, and we as individuals can move between these behavior patterns, but we have to consciously want to do that. And that's where self-discipline in. But you've got that dominant behavior pattern that controls everything. You've got the interpersonal skills, which makes it easy for you to talk to someone, and both of those are very outgoing personalities. Then you've got the introvert, so the steadiness, and the S is the steadiness personality. That's the one that's the peacemaker. That's the one that reads manual and goes by the book when they do things. Then you got the conscientious behavior pattern, where there's someone that questions everything until they know all the answer. And often people that are the S and the C behavior pattern, if they're in situations where they got to give interviews or make total decisions, they're very uncomfortable. Therefore, what happens? They are attracted to someone who is totally of the opposite behavior pattern, and they kind of push, or they put off they allow them to control that situation because that's not their comfort zone. And you can often watch someone who's not comfortable in front of, and just watch the little things they do, their body movements, that just shows that they're not comfortable doing that. So self-discipline also fosters resilience. When things don't go as planned, it's easier to stay the course because you're trained yourself to keep moving forward no matter the obstacles. Now, often we need to look at and think about how the idea of where you were yesterday, where you are today, and where you want to be in the future. And self-discipline is something that if you don't have it, you can learn it. You can become and develop discipline, but you have to get to a point where you know yourself. That's why it's so important to understand what your natural behavior pattern is and how to associate or bring a team of people on, especially in business, who you actually can team up with so that they can handle the things that you're not comfortable doing. Therefore, it makes it far easier. And it takes a team of people to make something work, especially in business and your goals and the things that you want to do. So, to sum it all up, self-discipline is not about perfection, it's about progress. It's the tool that keeps you focused, consistent, and resilient at your work toward your goals. If you take away one thing from this episode, it's this: start small. Pick one area of your life where you want to build more discipline and focus on making small, consistent improvements over time. Those small steps will add up in a big way. So here's a challenge for you. Set one small goal that requires self-discipline. Maybe it's exercising 3 times a week or spending 30 minutes a day on a personal project. Whatever it is, stick to it and notice how it starts to shift your mindset and actions. And remember, it's all about the mindset, how you see things, how you react. And for in and thank you very much for tuning in to today's episode of Live Without Limits. And I hope you found value in learning about self-discipline and how it can help you be more consistent. And I want you to know that, remember to come back next week when we talk about the steps to overcome bad habits and prevent relapse. So, stay self-disciplined, stay focused, and keep pushing towards your dreams. And remember, you have the capacity to do the things that you choose to do, and don't let anyone else be there to take control over your life, because it's up to you to decide exactly where you expect to be. Now, this is what I want to tell you about and think about. I had to practice self discipline almost all my life and be consistent simply because it was where I was putting things, how I was getting things done, and often. Now, my disability is cerebral palsy, and cerebral palsy affects how the brain processes information. Therefore, when I was in the classroom, I did not show that my grades were never showed what I was truly capable of doing. But once I left the classroom and I was able to take that knowledge and implement it, then I learned at a totally different level. So learning something, remember this, that if you had poor grades in school, it didn't mean you weren't learning. It just meant you were not a good test taker, because some people can take tests and do very well while others do very poor. But at the same time, once they take and implement that information and actually start using it, that's how you can tell whether or not someone has actually learned something. Therefore, look for ways and look at yourself. Find out what your strengths are and what your weaknesses are. And then interact with people whose strengths are your weaknesses and your strengths are their weaknesses. Because when you do that, what you're doing is you're working together as a team to achieve a goal. And think about those things. Think about how you can take better control of your life. And don't let someone else tell you what your goal should be, because that was really their goal. And they don't know you. And each of us are different and unique. Each of us have certain strengths that we were meant to be doing. And therefore, it's up to you to allow yourself to gain the control that you feel you should have in your life. And don't let anyone else tell you how you should live your life, because only you know what your goals are. Only you know where you should be. For instance, I had a mother that would constantly be telling me how I couldn't do this or I couldn't do that. And her only goal was to keep me at home with her on a government check so she could collect more money, and constantly belittling me. And because I didn't allow her to control me, because she was in control of the finances, she used that against me by writing me out of the estate. And now I have to go sue my sister because she now controls everything. And she comes in and abuses me psychologically. And then she goes in my other sister's home and abuses her not only psychologically, but physically. And then she abuses both of us financially because she's very narcissistic, just like my mother was, that it's all about her. And she's always competing against someone else in what they have, because my mother was always jealous, and she taught my sister how to be jealous of what the next person had. So it was important for them to feel better about themselves by putting the next person down and by abusing them. And these are people you don't want in your life, and you're better off not having any relationship with. And I know it's not easy, because remember, when you're talking about self-discipline, you're talking about the things that you need to do in order to reach your goals. And the conflict is that they may never have reached their goals in life. Therefore, they don't want you to reach your goals, because then it emphasizes just how lacking they are in who in not only their self-discipline but their self-image of themselves.